Welcome to the Content Podcast, conversations with Silicon Valley's creatives. I'm Daniel Garcia, your host and the cultivator of Content Magazine, published by SV Creates. This episode of the Content Magazine podcast is brought to you by Bonfire, a Silicon Valley digital agency building elevated websites for ambitious brands. Find out more about Bonfire at bonfire.com. Today we talk with British artist and photographer Marcus Lyon, whose photographic work has taken him around the world and includes portraits of Queen Elizabeth II. His current work, A Human Atlas Project, is research-based interdisciplinary exploration of people of a specified geography. So far, the series includes work from Brazil, Germany, Detroit, and now has brought him to Silicon Valley for the next edition entitled De.Coded, which is set to be released in the spring of 2023.
Now, your education was more like in political science, I see. How did that translate into doing photography and this project that you're doing, the De.Coded?
My university years were spent studying political science, but in the background I was already fascinated by creating images. I'd spent most of my teenage years really finding my own voice through taking pictures of friends and spaces and places that I was moving around. And the time at university allowed me to begin to think about how those images might tell deeper stories about our society and how we create community. But when I left university, that was a tough ask right then, because that was really about choosing to be a documentary photographer and to go and work in editorial and press work. And at that particular time, that particular type of photography was not well valued. And so I decided very early on, actually, that I would spend a focused amount of time building a dynamic commercial career to build the foundations in which I could then devote myself 100% to doing work that mattered.
Okay.
I decided really, I suppose, that nobody was out there who was going to pay me to do what I wanted to do, so I would fund it myself through being a successful commercial photographer. And from that day, early 20s, to my late 30s, I built a significant commercial career in photography. But off the side of my desk, for at least 2 months a year, I worked on projects where I felt I was able to voice my own opinions on the world through covering stories that I thought were important. So I worked extensively in Latin America, Asia, and Africa on stories about disadvantaged youth. I really focused on street children, some of the most disadvantaged children in our societies. And I became somewhat of an expert in that space. I was sought out by many of the larger global NGOs that were working in that space, and I shot multiple stories. And actually, in turn, ended up moving into leadership roles in those non-for-profits, which was a fascinating journey. Allowed me to develop a leadership space in my life that I probably wouldn't have found through photography. But I also worked extensively on stories around Paralympic sport, disabled sport, covered the Atlanta Games, Sydney Games, games in Athens, Beijing, and then my final games were London 2012, the games at home. So in a sense, political science allowed me to build a model in which I could use image making to tell deeper stories.
So then you were building a commercial photography career, but you were also in leadership in nonprofits. So where was your main job? How would you have described yourself in that particular time for life? As a photographer or a leader, a nonprofit's CEO?
I would the non-profit work was on the governance side.
Okay.
So I was chairman of 2 international development agencies and then on the board of directors of several others. So my work in that space was very much in governance, leadership, strategy, fundraising.
Okay.
And my commercial work was how I, paid my, food and fuel bills.
Yeah.
So the reality is I was doing very different roles in the 2 different spaces I was working. And to be honest, I describe myself as both.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Where it seems, I mean, even as you talked about your early days of doing political science and thinking about doing photography that mattered, what was it? Were you raised in a household or had youth experience that kind of had you somewhat of a social mind or?
I grew up in a house where both my parents were deeply committed to supporting the various communities around us. Both my parents are passionate about being kind and thoughtful and focusing in on those around us who are less fortunate.
Yeah.
So that was a great gift. I also grew up in a house where I was the middle son of 3 boys, where both my elder brother Andrew and my younger brother Justin were very ill. My elder brother died. My younger brother is one of the oldest people on the planet with a particular genetic condition. So I had a very early skirmish with death and loss that left me, fortunately, obviously scarred, affected, changed, but inspired to give back, to live an exceptional life that my elder brother Andrew never got the chance to live.
Yeah.
It helped me frame and form a very fundamental value in my life to show up, to be present, to engage with the day, to value every aspect of this extraordinary life that I'd been given, that had been taken from him. And I think in many ways that has been, despite the deep sadness that pervades my everyday about loss, it is the gift that keeps giving, because it's a fuel that cannot be denied. It's deeply powerful and helps me engage on levels that I just don't think I would have been able to engage on if I hadn't had that key early childhood experience.
Yeah, that's awesome that it gave you inspiration and empathy rather than like bitterness or angst. I mean, I'm sure you had to deal with some of those kind of emotions and stuff.
It's a journey, but I mean, I'm not unusual. I think actually one of the great gifts of the work I do today, which is not only about images, but it's about sound and deeper narratives, is that when you scratch beneath the surface of almost any life, there are deep wounds, there are huge journeys, emotional journeys that people have gone through. And I think actually my experience is, if I'm really honest, is more universal. It is the journey of life, and I suppose I'm lucky in the fact that those darker stories that define me have helped me step up in some way, and that they haven't beaten me. But I see that all around me, people who have not been beaten down, who refuse to be lost in their grief and their difficulties, and find strength to come back for a bit more.
Yeah. So the project that you're working on now is very much telling stories of people and their journey. So tell me a little bit about how, because it seems like some of the earlier work that you were doing, like the Brazil, India, Russia-China project was kind of looking at cities from afar with like little cars and little buildings and showing humanity, but kind of like on an impersonal but a familiar stepping back. And now it's portraits close in with a DNA test, with audio. Talk about that journey for you of how that changed even in your own personal photo work.
My early days were very much as a landscape and architectural photographer, but people would see my work in my portfolio and then commission me to take portraits. And that just was amazing.
Yeah.
I was very intimidated initially as a young man taking portraits. I felt like it was a great imposition. And it was probably, it was quite an awkward thing to do. But practice and beginning to understand that it was something I could do with some aptitude allowed me to become a portrait photographer. In my 30s, I returned, as you said, to do these mass migration, these global mass behavior images, these huge tableau images of our footprint on the world. It was a project that looked at migrations, at megacities, at the things we do en masse as recreational activities.
Yeah.
They were super popular. They went to galleries and museums around the world. They sold well. It was a really, really fun process. But what I was trying to do was bring multiple images together. So I was doing helicopter work, shooting lots and lots of files, and then bringing them together in my studio, spending 3 months making a single image. Super sophisticated montage images that told a deeper truth about the way we affected the planet. So I was kind of getting greedy there. It was fun. I could, the modern digital tools we have these days as image makers, I was just playing with them like crazy. It was so much fun.
Yeah.
But through that thread of looking for more, for being greedy for deeper stories, I realized that there was a deeper story I could tell with my images by combining it with sound. So at that stage, I started doing sound pieces, soundscapes that would go with my large-scale landscapes. And it never really manifested itself in an exhibition or in a big museum show, but I was playing with them and looking at ways of activating those sounds using modern communication devices, telephones and iPads and the like, and speaker systems, clever three-dimensional speaker systems. So when we hit on the idea of creating these human atlases, these books that look at 100 individuals nominated in a specific geography for doing extraordinary change work, for being the people who were standing up and being counted in societies that were being portrayed with quite skewed narratives, and we had a chance to tell a deeper story with a less skewed narrative, with the narrative, their narrative, them having a voice in the portrait, a voice in the process. I was like all in. So I could bring the portraits I'd taken originally when I'd been challenged to become a portrait photographer by those commissioning agents, and I was bringing together the storytelling that I was trying to tell with these large-scale tableaus. And the Human Atlas work has been yet another gift to my life through the creative world that my adult life has been defined by, where I could go and I could bring some of the skills, the limited skills I learnt over the years, to bear on a mission to tell powerful stories about amazing people. What a huge gift that's been.
Yeah, totally. So collecting these stories and hearing the stories, hearing stories changes us. For you, what do you think, what's one of the surprising changes that you feel within yourself because of hearing all these stories and experience all these stories and doing this project?
No, that's a great question. Great question. I think there are two themes that I should focus on to answer that fabulous question. The first change is that I have to admit that I was never a great listener. I was a communicator. I said as much as I needed to get what I needed to happen, to create the situations I required to get my portraits or to find my way in a situation. But I was a poor listener. And the listening experience that comes through recording live sound, conducting interviews, has taught me a skill set that is such a gift. It's such a gift in so many ways. I have my heart has grown so much more through it, and my knowledge and understanding. And the other theme, I think, is that when you truly listen, you become all the stories you've heard. And thus, when you speak as a multitude. And to be able to speak as a multitude with all the experiences that you've listened to and actually properly listened to, it's an incredibly powerful position to be in. You suddenly know that what you're saying has authority, and you see people looking at you in a different way and listening to you in a different way. And that's the gift that other people have given me through listening.
Kind of a collective wisdom storehouse in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to think of myself particularly as wise. I think I'm more thoughtful, and I have a better bank of experience these days. Yeah. But I certainly feel that when challenged to face the next day, I've got a bank of information people have shared with me that I can take into that day, and that will help me have authority over the situations I find myself in. And I can see that in the way people react to me, listen to me, appreciate me, are generous to me, and that's a massive gift, massive gift. And I thank all those people who've told all those stories to me. Thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome. So then, being a portrait photographer and doing portrait photography, talk about your approach to that. I mean, there's a lot of different schools. I kind of, let's ask this question. Does a picture really capture an essence of a person, do you feel? Do you think you take photos and this is this person?
I'm just amazed by how many different ways we can take portraits. And I genuinely believe that I'm not that great a portrait photographer. I practiced a lot, but I believe I'm able. I'm able. I can do it. I've done my 10,000 hours, and I can get a portrait over the line, no problem. I think for me it's a very personal thing. I love taking portraits. I love the intimate moment where I connect with someone, their eyes connect with mine. I use a large format camera, and I'm not hidden behind a camera. I'm present in the relationship with the person. I focus the camera, and then I'm there and I shoot the picture eye to eye. It's a connection. It's a moment where I can truly, with the skill set I've built over the years, touch somebody's life. Not everybody likes having their portrait taken, so sometimes I need to work with that, people's nerves and their uncomfortableness, to get them to a place where they feel good about where they're at with me taking a portrait of them. And then there's that joy of finding the image that, for me, and in that place and in that process and in that way with that lighting and all the different decisions I've made about how that photograph is going to be, that I see an image come through that I think is a really, really accurate, powerful representation of that human being in a way that represents them authentically and powerfully. And I love that. I love taking clever location portraits. I love using studio lighting. I love using God's best north light, or south light if you're in the southern hemisphere. I love creating dynamic juxtapositions of colour and form. But I also love doing the portraits I'm taking for the Human Atlas project, which are incredibly simple on white background portraits with super simple flash lighting. So the reality is it's a joy. It's another one of those things in my life that's a gift that keeps giving.
Yeah.
Never a dull moment, always an inspiration.
Yeah. It is really fun to be able to have that privilege, right? To be close with people and do that. Yeah. Tell us about the Human Atlas Project. What for you, give us a little bit of the structure of it and the end product of it. And then I'll ask you a little bit more about why you're here in our region.
The Human Atlas is really very simple. It's a process in which I try to communicate powerful narratives about extraordinary people to inspire the next generation to fashion their lives, not in the shadow of those who have come before, but on their shoulders. So it's a call to service. It's a social impact art project. It's designed to lift us up and let us see what we can do when we both self-author and co-author a more hopeful future. Its process is perhaps a little bit more complicated. We build our atlases from long-term, deeply researched nomination processes where we collate and curate a group of normally 100 people in a specified geography through listening to local leaders, activists, commentators, journalists, and getting them to nominate individuals in their space, in their jurisdiction, who are moving the needle in their streets, their neighbourhoods, their cities, and perhaps beyond. We then take that cohort of people, we take their photographs, we record a 20 to 40 minute interview, and we analyse their ancestral DNA. We then map those 3 pillars of identity, visual, spoken, and genetic, together to tell this deeper story through image-activated app-based soundtracks, oral histories, super high-quality portraits, and ancestral DNA maps.
Yeah.
Those 3 elements hopefully give a 3-dimensional nature to the final portrait, and I think most importantly give the portrait sitter, the subject, some agency in the relationship with the audience. So when the audiences experience this work, they have to listen to the person who's in the portrait.
Yeah.
So that person has a voice in the relationship with the audience. And I think that's where this work resonates, connects, and hopefully affects some sort of positive change.
Yeah, awesome. And so then you've done Somos Brasil, you've done i.Detroit, and then Deutschland, and then now you're here in Silicon Valley, or Santa Clara County, the Bay Area. What drew you to this area over some other place in the United States or in the world?
There are 2 common themes that we tend to bring together in our human atlases, and that's migration and skewed narratives. So all of the projects have focused on places where stereotyping seems to be the norm. All Brazilians are footballers. All Germans are dull and can't make jokes and aren't particularly community-based. People in Detroit live in a failed city. Silicon Valley is just tech engineers. So those stereotypes are obviously all totally and utterly incorrect. So that's a lovely, very fertile landscape for us to play our role. where we can tell more accurate narratives. We can go and listen and tell the story through people's actual voices who are living the lived experience of the space we are talking about. The other thing which is common to all the projects is a super powerful migration theme. Brazil is a migration story. Germany, we were studying and looking at the refugee crisis in Europe and the people who were trying to fashion a more hopeful future in Germany by building a society that would accept and help people who were coming to Germany as first-generation migrants. The Detroit story is the story of the Great Migration of African Americans from the Deep South escaping Jim Crow and obscene racism and looking for a better job, a better future, a piece of the American dream. And of course, Silicon Valley is perhaps the biggest migration story of them all. I think there are figures which I've read that say upwards of 35-40% of the people here are first-generation migrants. And before that, of course, it's West Coast America. This is a young society. This is a story of colonization and all sorts of complicated migrations over the years, but it's a society of many people from many places. So those themes persist in the Human Atlas work and add a lovely, deep vein of fascination about the human condition and our search for a better life.
Yeah, cool. For you, what would you say for you if you were looking back at your full life and, in the last days on your deathbed, if you will, what would be for you, you'd say that this would be described as success for you? What do you think that would be?
Success? Success for me is kindness. It's care of others. It's living a life where in every way that's possible you show up as your best self. It's through the work I do, the opportunity to truly touch people's hearts and bring a deep smile or a moment of tearful recognition or a deep sense of empathy between the stories I'm telling and the people who are looking at it.
Do you have like a guiding philosophy of life then, would you say? That you kind of like a...
I suppose my North Star is that same theme of compassion and care, empathy, kindness. Yeah. I feel that if you arrive anywhere and you can be the person who connects and allows those around you to be their best selves, then that is you've done okay by the day and by your people. I think that, community in a sense is listening to the rhythm of people, and that ability to put yourself in the shoes of others and walk that walk helps guide you. So that would be my North Star.
Yeah, cool. For you as a photographer, you took my picture, so we took my portrait. So I'm just fascinated on that side of it, on the atmosphere that you've created here. Very warm and welcoming, and obviously that's part of your personality. But as a portrait photographer, what do you what's some of your tactics and approaches that you take in to capture and to create a portrait?
Well, I suppose there are two sides to that. There's the practical side, and then there's the emotional side. The practical side is that taking a photograph is like a domino run. And the first domino is the idea, which is king. And the last domino is a successfully delivered image that somebody looks at. And between those two dominoes are literally hundreds of activities, choices, decisions, movements, the right camera, the right film, the right light, the right location, the right lens, the right word said at the right time, the right clothes, the right colleagues, the right stands, the right wires that connect your lights to your camera. And I mean, even down to a screw that attaches your camera to your tripod. Leave that behind in the studio on a location shoot and you're in big trouble. You can't deliver. That's a missing domino, and your idea's great, and unfortunately that last domino's not going to fall because there's a missing domino. So there's a practical process to photography which I love. The incredible, almost military organization that's required to deliver an image. And then there's the bit we've talked about quite a lot in this podcast, and that I like to focus on, which is the emotional bit. Yeah. And there are plenty of photographers who are quite happy for their subject matter to be quite uncomfortable in their set or in their space. I believe the relatively famous British photographer Snowden, who married Princess Margaret, Anthony Armstrong Jones. Armstrong Jones was his original name, but he traded under Lord Snowden. And he, I think, professed a desire to make people feel uncomfortable in front of the camera because it made a better photograph. I can't think of anything worse. I think that almost sounds abusive because I think I could get just as good a photograph as he could get by making somebody feel very comfortable and then finding something edgy that created a final image. So, not that I'm saying I'm Anthony Armstrong Jones. I just feel that, you don't have to make people feel uncomfortable. So my ethos is very much about exuding a real warmth and a huge confidence that people are in the hands of somebody who really knows what they're doing. So I've been commissioned to take pictures of, the Queen, 4 British Prime Ministers, numerous well-known celebrities and supermodels. I've been there, I've done it. And I mean, actually, if you ask me, I prefer taking pictures of ordinary people. The glitz and the glamour of taking pictures of sort of somebody well-known does not interest me at all, doesn't drive me at all. But, that there's a confidence that you need to be able to approach people who are well-known and deal with the situations, often high pressure, often very time constrained, where you show up and you need to be right on your game because you might just literally have
10 minutes,
seconds. I mean, last portrait I took of a super important, systemically important business titan, he gave me 39 seconds.
Oh wow, 39 seconds.
You got to deliver, and you got to have the confidence to know that you got your shot in 39 seconds.
Well, you got your shot in 39 seconds, even if you don't get the shot. it's the shot.
You got to get a shot. No, you got to get the shot. I mean, a shot is that's a starter for 10. That's your first. That's the first press. But the shot has to come within. But I mean, portraits definitely. My ethos is there's no silver bullet. There's no clever way of doing it. You've got to put in your 10,000 hours. You've got to be practiced. You've got to get your dominoes in a row. And for me, you got to make people feel really welcome. Really welcome. Like this is I want them to know just how grateful I am, how much gratitude I have with them showing up and being prepared, trusting me to take their portrait.
Well, you're succeeding. I mean, I felt really at home here, and I appreciate it. I'm sure everybody else who's done it. I did want to ask you one other question. How are we going to time? Are you okay to do one more question?
I've got as much time as you want because it's the end of the day. I'm
off.
And this is delightful.
And
actually, it's just as we discussed earlier when you were asking me about which side of the interview, and it's really interesting. We're here in Silicon Valley. We've just done our 45th interview with you. We've got another 55 to go. So actually, it's delightful to be on the other side.
Okay.
I'm having an absolute ball. This is. I'm so grateful to you for turning up when we're almost 50% through a very long process and giving the opportunity to take a different seat for a moment. So thank you very much, Daniel. I appreciate
your time. Yeah. I want to ask you this question because I struggle with this as a photographer. I find I shoot. And I think it's the struggle of kind of like the artist of shooting. What I think in some ways I found my voice, but other times I feel like, am I just falling back into comfortable habits, right? Do you feel as a photographer, and then, doing a project that's how long is it 10 years? I mean, when did
20, we started the Human Atlas process in kind of about 2013. We shot the first pictures, I think, in 2014. So it's getting on. It's almost a decade. We'll be able to say a decade quite quickly. Certainly, we've just been commissioned by the Getty to do a project in Los Angeles.
Oh, cool.
Which is very exciting.
Yeah.
After this one here in Silicon Valley, and that'll be 10 years. 10 years and 5 big projects. So
this project is very much, it has a look. It's the white background. It's focused on the person. You as an artist, are you feeling like, I want to shoot some other style or anything? Are you feeling, a little anxiousness or anything like that? Or?
I'm doing plenty of other work right now. I'm still serving on the board of a global leadership organization, so I have other things that I work on off the side of my desk, which occupies a lot of my energy and feels really important work. The question about whether I feel stuck would be, I'd have to say no. And I think that's probably because nowadays I'm doing photography, sound, DNA, design, podcasts. We're providing educational information from our books, methodology from our books for universities to teach our work as a university course. So I'm constantly being challenged to up my game in my creative processes. In terms of the specific question about photography, I still find a challenge in the type of portraiture I'm doing at the moment, which is, as you rightly say, super simple white background. But it's a bit like that the first photography challenge I was given by a colleague who said, well, if you really want to challenge your lighting, go and photograph a white cube on a white background. So actually, that's extraordinarily simple, a white cube on a white background, but it's difficult because you haven't got all the tricks that you can bring to a location shot where you've got an amazing location, or you're using fancy lighting, or you've got beautiful end of day sunshine. You can play tricks with light and color. I'm basically got a head, a body, 2 arms, a torso, and legs to just below the knee. And it's the same on everybody. But we are challenged by that. It's a very simple set of elements that we have to work and find something interesting in. I think the other thing is, and I think this is perhaps a really good final point about that question, a point to that question, is each one of those portraits is a chance to reimagine, to reinvent what you've done before. Because each person is so beautifully unique. And I think through the work we're doing, we see that uniqueness. And therefore, it doesn't feel like something I've ever done before. I just took your portrait. That felt so new, so true, so beautiful to have that moment with you, to get to know you better, to shoot your portrait, to spend time with you. So, no, I don't. I don't. And I'm glad I don't, because then I need to get out there and reinvent myself. So maybe in a couple of years' time, I'll have done 10 years on this gig, on this particular journey, Human Atlas journey, and then it'll be time for reinvention.
Yeah.
So the time will come, I'm sure, Daniel, but it hasn't come yet.
Yeah, it's almost there's a forced creativeness that comes with those real tight restrictions, And I think what you said too is like it's really amazing. Just being in a situation where it's a new and a different person makes it an entirely different experience for you as the artist, Yeah.
That's one of the beauties of portrait art.
Yeah.
It's always a new piece of clay, it's always a new piece of stone, it's always a new palette of colors, it's always a new landscape. It's a joy. It really is. I mean, it's almost the biggest gift.
Yeah. Cool. So this project will be released in a year. What's the timeline and to kind of close it, and how people can find out more about the work?
We've got no particular deadline on the De.Coded project. I'm hopeful we'll be able to bring it back to San Jose, Santa Clara Valley, the Silicon Valley in late 2023 as a book and a launch event where I'll gather all the 101 people who feature in it together and we can celebrate each other. How the project manifests itself in other forms, I'm not quite sure yet. We're hoping we can do some form of an exhibition. It would be nice to do something very democratic, an exterior projection, an exterior exhibition, a traveling exhibition. And I'm very keen for us to bring a podcast series back, but I would have thought that would be during 2024. And then obviously there's my hope that we can find an educational establishment, a university or a college, who would like to use the methodology and the connections and the sound and the DNA mapping to teach a course about the extraordinary human capital of Silicon Valley.
Yeah, cool. And where can people find out about this project and other projects?
We are very aware that our books are super high-end, expensive, and elitist. We love them like that because we like the very high-end values that come with the best papers, the best print, the best design. But we realize it's not affordable for everyone. The books are always available through my website, marcuslyon.com, but we always, and this is key, have all the information available democratically, free for anyone at ahumanatlas.com.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Marcus. I mean, it's been wonderful meeting you and getting to know you. And
thank you.
Thanks for sitting down and doing this. I appreciate your
time.
time.
Taking such care and fabulous questions.
Thank you.
You made my day.
You made mine. Thank you. To find out more about Marcus's project, go to his website, marcuslyon.com, and also ahumanatlas.com. Thank you for listening to the Content Magazine podcast. Follow us on social media at Content Mag. Visit our website to become a member and help us to continue to tell the stories of the local creatives. This episode's music is 408 by Jack Pavlina. Find out more about Jack on his Instagram at Jack Pavlina Music.